Impact and Influence. Today's guest is a lady who I admire so much, incredibly smart, and helps us a lot at REGROWTH with lots of questions. And our topic today is very much around something that's relevant to industry, around privacy reform. And we're going to talk about the practicality of that in everybody's offices, and in particular collecting and using data. I've got with me Madeline, or Maddie, because I'll get in trouble for saying that, Urmoneit, who is a senior associate at Swaab. Hi, Maddie. How are you?
I'm well, Kylie. How are you?
Very well. So, Maddie, we want to have a little chat today around some changes in reform that's coming with respect to privacy and data. And there's obviously been a lot in the news, and even some more on the weekend with data breaches. But before we get to that, we want to know who Maddie is and how long have you been in law, and what's that journey looked like?
Yeah, sure. So I have been in the law for 8 years as a lawyer. And I have worked for that entire 8 years with a lady who is no stranger to REGROWTH, the one and only Julie Briscoe. So my entire 8 years has been working under Julie's wing, and I've loved every minute of it.
And Maddie, tell me, because there's a fair commitment to your craft, right? You must look at us in real estate sometimes and go, well, I had to go to uni for 6 or 7 years. Tell us about the study and the commitment to your craft and what that has looked like and how hard it's been.
Yeah, absolutely. So I did a double degree at university, which was a Bachelor of Law and then also a Bachelor of Creative Industries, which was majoring in creative and professional writing, which has really helped me, in my sort of progression in the law as well, because you have to be able to write well. So that background really helped me. And it was a long haul. It was 5.5 years of study there. And during that time, I worked for NAB in their legal department and was working sort of throughout my studies as well, which served as a really great background. We were doing a lot of document review in that role, and basically, churning through documents over and over, and that sort of rote learning of looking at legal documents sort of day in, day out really helped me sort of progress once I actually started as a lawyer.
So I love having these conversations because I've known you for a while now, and I didn't know that you were in the financial services sector, but it does explain a lot around your attention to detail and the passion and the area of specialisation that you have now. I'm a big believer, and I love learning and unpacking people's learning techniques and around muscle memory and things like that. So I'm really curious, what did you learn at uni, or what have you learned during your career when you're doing all this reading and summarisation that you could share with our listeners today, if you've got any handy hints or anything that might help them with respect to when they're doing their studies or their licensing?
Yeah, it seems like such an obvious answer that I'm going to give you, but I think it is so crucial to my muscle memory and remembering things. And it's note taking. It's so obvious, but if you write things down as you're listening to them, it really helps me sort of remember things. And when I can look back on those notes, for me, I always have my pen and paper with me in every single meeting that I go to, whether it's formal or informal. I love taking notes.
It's interesting you say that, because quite often people will rock up at training and I'm like, where's your pen and paper? Or, are you actually, and a lot of people record these days, which is fine, everyone learns differently, but even, on your tablets or your remarkables and summarising. Thank you. I just, a bit selfish, I wanted to ask you that and I digress. But secondly, something we've had you doing and some work on with REGROWTH for a couple of months now is what's coming with respect to reform and what that legislative reform looks like and how it will impact us as an industry. Could you talk to that a little bit for us?
Yeah, absolutely. So the Privacy Act and privacy reforms that are sort of upcoming are huge. So this is a really big area that the government is focusing on, and it's really, the trigger for that has been a number of high-profile data breaches. You would have heard about the Optus one, various other data breaches that have triggered sort of legislation and action and reform in this space. So it was last year around February that the Privacy Act review report was published. And this is a report that had 116 proposals for reform in this space. So it's a massive amount of reform that they're proposing in this area. And basically where we are now is that they're expecting some draft legislation to be tabled around August this year. So it's upcoming in the next couple of months that we're going to see some draft legislation with these reforms.
So Maddie, with that, because this has been going for a long time, so I remember you came and spoke to our Elevating Leadership and Business course last year, around a similar time actually, and you were talking about the reforms there and what they'd mean. So from when the draft bill comes in to when this legislation will actually come through, what sort of timelines are we talking?
Oh, it's tricky for me to say. I mean, government does move slowly, but I couldn't give you an exact time frame, but they are like escalating this. There was some recent incidents of doxing, they call it, which has really caused the government to sort of put the accelerator on with getting this draft legislation out.
Can I ask a dumb question? What is that?
So doxing is essentially where you find and release people's personal information, normally with like a malicious intent. So it'll be people finding someone's email or whatever and release it with some malicious intent that they want, people to contact these people and, so it's something that's come up and it's quite an interesting concept as well.
Very broad.
Very broad.
And Maddie, like in agency, we have a lot of data and a lot of information. I think, and look, we could probably talk about this and in the preamble, I said to Maddie, we probably won't go any longer than 15 minutes, but I think we're probably going to, if that's okay, is you think about people applying for rental properties and data that we hold, agency agreements with landlords and bank account details. So let's talk to that first. So what is law around that and what is best practice, particularly, if someone's signing up someone with an agency agreement and there's bank account details on that agency agreement and storage of that information and who's got access to that information?
Yeah. And it's completely up to the individual organisation to come up with your protocols for this. There's not sort of, it's not legislated how you need to retain people's personal information, but you have to be transparent with people about what information you are collecting, why you're collecting it, the uses, and also who and why you disclose that information to. So these are some of the key sort of items that you'll see in a privacy policy on a company's website or elsewhere. But yeah, a privacy policy is really important, transparent way of disclosing sort of what information's collected, how you store it, for how long you store it. All of these things that people are becoming sort of more and more interested in because of the risk of, data breaches and their personal information becoming, the subject of a data breach.
And I think, Maddie, look, something we're saying to our clients all the time is with respect to make sure your two-step authentications are turned on, people don't leave their computer on at night, being careful around email addresses, that they click on, etc. Something that we do a lot with Swaab and yourself and Julie is frequently check our privacy policy and collection notices. And what would you be saying is best practice to a business owner around how often that they should get that reviewed with a specialist like yourself?
Yeah, I would probably say when there are changes like this upcoming reform in the law, that it is important to review, things like your privacy policy or collection notices for, open for inspections and those sort of documents. But also when you change your internal policies. So if there's some change to how you collect your information, if you get it from a different sort of means, or if you store it for different periods of time than you originally did, then it's important to obviously update and ensure that your privacy policy is reflecting an accurate sort of picture of how you use, store, handle people's personal information.
So Maddie, in New South Wales, for example, and I'm a Class 1 licence holder, I have to update my policies and procedures annually anyway. So that's probably something, guys, is a good one to include and make sure you're covering off on. I think collection notices and privacy policy and things is something that sometimes gets missed, and it's very much around process in the office. So I'd like to, and look, if you're with a franchisor, reach out to your franchisor. Obviously, if you're with the Real Estate Institute, they've got a lot of resources around this. But what I want to talk to you about now, Maddie, is the collection notices. So we've just had you draft for our clients hot off the press last week. a new collection notice for open homes, because we're a little bit concerned with the mystery shopping and the health checks we've been doing for some of our clients at their open homes as how loose it is, or if they've even got one on display. So you've done a very comprehensive one for us. Could you talk to us around some of the things that you've put in there and what officers need to consider when they are displaying that at open homes?
Yeah, of course. So yes, this is a little baby that I've created for your use, and it is something that sort of works in conjunction with your privacy policy. So it's not something that's to be in place of a privacy policy. You should still have a full privacy policy that covers all of your general privacy handling matters. But
so
this
Maddie, we could put a QR code on there to the privacy policy at the end of the collection notice.
Yeah, absolutely,
Yeah,
or a hyperlink or something to link people to the more fulsome disclosure that's in your privacy policy. But the collection notice is really for like a specific purpose, and of course this one is for open for inspection. So you have people attend the property for the purpose of inspection, and in order for them to get admitted to the property, you have to collect their personal information, being their name, perhaps a contact number, email address, and those things are personal information for the purposes of the Privacy Act, and accordingly you should be very transparent and clear to people about why you're collecting that information, who you're going to disclose it to, and essentially people's options as well for things like opting out if they don't want you to use their information for marketing purposes or other secondary purposes. Then people need, to be told that they can opt out and have their information removed. So yeah, essentially what it goes through is sort of the facts and circumstances of collection, purposes of collection, consequences if personal information is not collected. So that might include that people can't actually complete the inspection of the property if you're not given their name and personal information. And then it talks about as well in the purposes, the primary purposes as well as secondary purposes. So you have really your primary purposes are to ensure safety and security of property owners, existing occupiers and their property in connection with the inspection. So obviously, as custodian of the property, you need a certain degree of security around who is entering there, if there's any damage to the property or that sort of thing. As well as just complying with general professional obligations. If you don't have people's names and contact details, it makes it quite difficult to sort of, essentially comply with your business obligations, and then also obligations under the relevant agreement with the property owner, so an agency agreement. If there's specific instructions in an agency agreement about how open for inspections are to be conducted, then obviously that information will be needed to comply with that, and also to register people's interest in the property so you can give them updates. So those would be sort of the primary purposes, and then secondary purposes, things like marketing, sharing with them other properties that might be of interest, and that sort of thing. And then there's also the disclosure section, which is quite important, who you're disclosing information to. It could be any conjunction, co-listing agent, auctioneer, your representatives or agents that act on your behalf. So that could
be the
vendor. No, yeah, the vendor as well. So the property owner where necessary.
That's something that comes up a lot, Maddie. Sometimes people will come through, I don't want the owner to know who came through. And I think making sure, that the operators that are listening to this have got that included as well. So we're covering ourselves. And sorry to interrupt you, but it's relevant to what you're talking about right now is who you can disclose information to. A lot of agency operators are now engaging, contractors or conjunctional agents under their brand. How important is it for officers? So let's say I'm trading as XYZ Proprietary Limited and I engage with you as a contractor that does work with us, but also potentially with some, other officers, but you're your own free agent. But you are, spending 60 or 70% of your time with our office and working with us, is how important is it for you to have in the collection notices those other operators or entities to make sure that they can actually access the information as well?
Yeah, it's crucial, really, because it can sort of be, it seems obvious, but it can sometimes be overlooked that different entities are different legal persons. So, you might think, oh, yeah, but I'm just operating under that. But you're a different company, you're a different legal person. So it's really important to include in your collection notice who you're disclosing it to, whether it's, um, a contractor, or whether you have at the beginning of the collection notice that this collection notice and references to sort of we, our, and us in this collection notice includes sort of this company, its related entities, and its contractors, or something that covers that off there. But you have to be clear with people as to what you're doing, and the distinction between the different sort of entities as different legal persons is an important one.
Now, Maddie, this is a bit of a curly one, and perhaps I should have broached this with you earlier, but something we do incredibly well in property management or rental departments is we put in our agency agreements or our authorities with our landlords that from time to time we engage third parties, such as, trust auditors or potentially offshoring companies, etc., and we get their consent. But I don't see many sales agency agreements. In fact, I think I've seen one where we have a special condition in there to say, consent around that sort of thing as well. So I would say if we're using an offshore company, is that something that should be disclosed as well?
Absolutely. So it's one of the important touch points for collection notices and also privacy policies to give disclosure around any cross-border disclosures. It's one of the things that's in the sort of Australian privacy principles that you have to touch on that. And you might be specific in who exactly you're providing it to that's, across border, or it might be more of a general point that we may use certain third-party services which might have offices overseas, and as a result, your personal information could be disclosed to overseas recipients. So it doesn't have to have sort of the degree of specificity of naming those cross-border people, but the more specific, the better, frankly.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of companies like Wingman, for example, who are pretty well known and respected in Australasia, and just naming that entity with their trading details would certainly be enough. Obviously, not the individuals, but it is something that's frightening in our health checks that we do in businesses, that people aren't nominating that, and I definitely think it's important to disclose. I'm very mindful and respectful that we've had you for nearly half an hour. I could talk to you all day long, but probably just want to wrap, Maddie.
Yep.
Where commonly do you see businesses go wrong, or things that might become folklore in not just real estate businesses, right, but in any business where they're doing things that they shouldn't be doing? Have you got any advice around that?
I would say that it's amazing some of the privacy policies and collection notices that you see where people have just spat out a precedent or something and not really given it the thought that it requires and tailored it to what they actually do with their business in terms of handling people's personal information. I would say it's more common than not that people just sort of hit the touchstones on certain information that needs to be included in a privacy policy, but don't actually really give it the thought that it deserves, and that people are becoming more and more concerned with, frankly.
So Maddie, on that then, I'm just thinking about the amount of tech platforms that we've got in our industry where we take people's details when they walk in the front door, and we do it through platforms that are provided by third-party tech suppliers.
Yeah.
Or we do application forms. So we're effectively sharing the person's data. What should we be asking those suppliers around their T's and C's and what they do to protect the data when we sign up with them?
Yeah, absolutely. You should check out their privacy policy, and you should also ask them questions about like how they secure information, how long they keep information, if they put information in anonymously, like sometimes they can use different tactics to have the information be anonymous. So there's all sorts of different tools that people might use. But yeah, I'd be very concerned with how long they retain it and how often they purge data on their system, and also how they keep it secure.
So, Maddie, look, at half an hour, and I said to you 15 minutes, so thank you for being so generous with your time. Guys, this is not a sell to Swaab, but they are our preferred lawyers, and they're amazing at what they do. And as you can hear, Maddie's a subject expert in this space. Maddie, is it okay with you if we include your contact details when we send this out to our database? So if anyone is curious or want a health check on their privacy policy or anything that they're doing with their data, they can contact you?
Absolutely.
Okay, excellent. So we'll share that afterwards. Maddie, thanks so much for your time. And guys, for those that are listening, we will include a link underneath as well as where you can go to our website to download that collection notice. All right, Maddie, thanks so much.
Thanks, Kylie.
All the best. Bye.